Hey guys, tonight we wander somewhere both quiet and impossibly old. You find yourself standing at the edge of the Nile Delta, that dreamy, endless fan of marshes where land and water seem to blur into one another. The air is thick and cool, full of whispers, frogs, unseen birds, the distant splash of something that might be a crocodile, or maybe just a fish with delusions of grandeur. The morning mist floats low, turning the papyrus reeds into hazy silhouettes that sway like they've been dancing here for 5,000 years. You can almost feel the pulse of history under your bare feet, a heartbeat made of water and time. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I love knowing where you're listening from, so drop a comment with your location and your local time. I bet someone out there is falling asleep halfway around the world right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The world around you is still half asleep. The horizon glows faintly pink, and the first rays of the Egyptian sun slide over the reeds, glinting off the water like liquid bronze. You stand at the very place where civilization once found its voice. Long before paperbacks and PDFs, before even parchment or vellum, there was this: a jungle of papyrus, the plant that would quietly teach humanity how to remember itself. You take a slow breath, letting the damp, grassy scent fill your lungs. The papyrus plants tower above your head, some nearly 15 feet tall. Their stalks are triangular, not round like bamboo, and topped with an explosion of green filaments that look like the world's most unkempt fireworks. To your right, a farmer kneels in the shallows, his feet lost in the mud. His linen kilt is rolled to his knees, and he hums under his breath while inspecting the plants. He doesn't need a ruler or chart to know which reeds are ready. His ancestors have done this for millennia, and he can tell by touch alone which stems are mature enough to harvest. You crouch beside him, the mud cool and thick around your ankles. He cuts one stem near the base, the sound a soft shh. The papyrus bleeds a little watery sap that glistens in the light. You hold it and realize how light it feels, yet sturdy, nature's version of reinforced tubing. This one plant will soon become part of a sheet that might hold a poem, a contract, or maybe just some royal accountant's endless list of grain shipments. You glance up at the sky, where white egrets drift lazily across the morning. The Nile stretches far to the south, carrying stories from Nubia, from Thebes, from sacred places older than memory. Papyrus isn't just a plant here, it's a life source. Ancient Egyptians used it for boats, mats, sandals, baskets, even that questionable early version of sunscreen made from crocodile dung mixed with oil. Yes, you heard that right. Somewhere out there, someone slathered themselves in reptile residue and thought, this'll do nicely. But the real magic of papyrus, the part that turned it from a weed into the foundation of written history, lies within its pale heart. Deep inside the green skin is a white, pulpy pith that can be sliced into thin strips. Strips that, when layered and pressed, form a smooth, flexible surface. The first paper before paper even existed. Historians still argue whether this innovation came from one single inventive mind or evolved gradually through centuries of experimentation. Some credit a legendary figure named Imhotep, yes, the same one later turned into a Hollywood villain, as possibly one of the early engineers who explored papyrus's potential. Others think it was a collective discovery, born out of necessity in a world obsessed with recording every offering, tax, and temple decree. Either way, by around 3000 BCE, Egypt was already turning reeds into words. The wind moves through the marsh, and it sounds almost like quiet applause. You look out across the green expanse, imagining how many scrolls once began right here. Messages to gods, inventories of bread, the earliest poems about love and the afterlife. The sheer number is dizzying. Some scholars estimate that during the height of the New Kingdom, Egypt exported tons of papyrus every year. This soggy delta, with its mosquitoes and hippos, was the Silicon Valley of ancient documentation. As you wander deeper into the reeds, you start to notice small things. Dragonflies balancing on stems, a frog's ripple expanding across the water, a half-submerged crocodile pretending to be a log with very realistic eyes. The Egyptians saw the papyrus plant as divine, a symbol of creation itself. In their mythology, the world first emerged from watery chaos, the Nun, and from that primordial soup sprouted the first papyrus stalk. The god Horus was sometimes depicted nestled within it, and pharaohs often carried staffs carved to resemble its elegant form. You can't help but smile. Imagine carrying a staff that says, in essence, yes, I'm king, but also, I like plants. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the creak of a wooden raft, fishermen starting their day. You wave, and one waves back, probably wondering what you're doing waist-deep in a marsh, muttering to yourself about writing materials. The light grows warmer, gilding every leaf. The farmer beside you stands, bundles a few fresh stalks under his arm, and nods toward the village. It's time to see what happens next. You follow him along a narrow, muddy path, your toes sinking with every step. The air smells of clay and sun. Papyrus villages like this were everywhere along the delta thousands of years ago. Small clusters of huts near channels that could flood and drain with the seasons. The people who lived here weren't royal scribes or priests, but without them, those elites would have had nothing to write on. These farmers were the invisible foundation of Egyptian literacy. As you walk, the rhythmic sound of chopping and splashing fills the air, more workers harvesting reeds, each with practiced efficiency. Children carry bundles to shore, laughing, while a woman rinses freshly cut stalks in the shallows. The entire process feels timeless, cyclical, and somehow soothing. You realize that even though this world is ancient, the pace of it is exactly what your overstimulated brain craves: slow, patient, and repetitive. At the village edge, you pause and glance back. The marsh stretches endlessly behind you, shimmering under the rising sun. Somewhere in that sea of green, the next great scroll might already be waiting to be born. You imagine it, a document detailing the construction of a new temple, or a love letter between two scribes pretending not to notice each other during work. Maybe even an early bedtime story for some Egyptian child, drifting off while his mother softly reads a tale of Ra sailing across the sky. You smile at the thought. Humans have always needed stories, whether carved in stone, whispered beside fires, or written on the skin of a plant pulled from a muddy river. And tonight, you've just taken your first quiet step into that long tradition. The reeds sway gently, as if nodding in agreement. Somewhere, a heron croaks good night, or maybe good morning, and the world continues to turn, carrying the first pages of history on its breeze. You follow the farmer's quiet footsteps deeper into the marsh, where the papyrus grows thicker and the air grows heavy with that sweet green scent of river life. The morning haze begins to lift, and the Nile Delta unfurls around you, an enormous wetland of silver pools, mud channels, and shimmering reeds that stretch as far as the eye can see. It's not glamorous. Your sandals stick. A mosquito the size of a lentil has just claimed your left wrist. But still, it feels sacred. You're standing in the very lungs of ancient Egypt, surrounded by the plant that once helped humans take their first organized breath of memory. Everywhere you look, the papyrus plants rise like emerald pillars, their stems tall and triangular, tapering to that explosion of thread-like fibers at the top. The sunlight hits the crown of each stalk, turning it into a glowing halo. Up close, you notice how each stem is smooth, almost waxy, and surprisingly firm. It doesn't crumble when you squeeze it. It flexes, resilient. You pull one closer, tilt it, and notice tiny droplets of dew sliding down its sides. The papyrus is alive, awake, and humming with quiet potential. The farmer, let's call him Mena, though his real name is long lost to history, wades into the water until it reaches his knees. He gestures for you to join him, and when you do, you immediately feel that delicious squelch of mud between your toes. Mena laughs softly, the sound like a low drum beat. He doesn't need to say much, you can tell he's done this 1,000 times. He grips one papyrus stalk, tests its strength with a tug, and nods. "Good heart," he might have said, if we spoke the same language. You can sense that he means it's ready, its fibers full and mature, but not yet brittle. The papyrus, like everything else in Egypt, depends on the rhythms of the Nile. Too early, and the pith is weak. Too late, and it dries too hard to use. Timing here is everything. As Mena cuts the stem near its base, you see its cross-section, a triangular shape enclosing that soft white pith, the precious core that will soon carry the words of gods and kings. You reach out and touch it. Cool, slightly sticky, almost spongy. It's strange to think that something this humble could outlast pyramids, but papyrus did. Some scrolls written thousands of years ago still survive today, their fibers only a little yellowed, their words still legible. Historians still argue whether papyrus was first domesticated intentionally or simply harvested wild. Some evidence suggests that ancient Egyptians began cultivating it in managed plots as early as the First Dynasty, around 3100 BCE. Others insist it always grew in abundance naturally, so why bother domesticating it? The truth, as with most ancient things, probably lies somewhere in between. Egyptians were masters of adapting the Nile's moods. It's entirely possible they both gathered and cultivated it, depending on the season. You move through the marsh, following Mena and his family as they cut and gather. They stack the reeds carefully, aligning them so the stems don't bend. Each bundle is tied with a strip of dried papyrus, nothing wasted. A child hums a tune as he splashes past, carrying smaller stalks to shore. The whole process feels choreographed, part farming, part ritual, part community. A dragonfly lands on your shoulder, its wings catching the light like stained glass. For a moment, everything is still, the kind of stillness that belongs only to wetlands at dawn. The only sounds are the low croaks of frogs and the distant call of an ibis. You think about how much life depends on this one plant. Papyrus wasn't just writing material, it was rope, basket, sailcloth, and even food. Some Egyptians peeled and ate the white pith raw, while others roasted it or boiled it into a sweet syrup. Imagine that, snacking on ancient stationery. You can almost picture the scene centuries ago. Traders in linen kilts hauling papyrus bundles onto barges, priests decorating temples with painted stalks, and scribes in Thebes dipping reed pens into soot-black ink. All of that began here, with this simple green miracle swaying in the delta wind. You crouch down to examine the base of a plant still rooted in the mud. Tiny fish dart between the stems, silver flashes that vanish as soon as you move. The roots of the papyrus spread out like delicate fingers, gripping the silt. It's no wonder the Egyptians saw it as sacred. Papyrus embodied order emerging from chaos, stability born of water. Even its shape had symbolic meaning. The papyrus blossom represented Lower Egypt, while the lotus represented Upper Egypt. Together, they became the dual emblem of a united kingdom. As the morning wears on, the sun climbs higher. The mist burns away, revealing a world of glittering greens and browns. Mena pauses to rest, setting down his sickle and wiping sweat from his forehead with the edge of his kilt. You sit beside him on a rock, the two of you watching the gentle movement of the reeds. There's something hypnotic about the way they sway, all in rhythm, all whispering the same story. You realize how easy it is to lose time here. A papyrus boat glides silently across a nearby channel, its curved ends rising gracefully like horns. Two fishermen steer with paddles carved from tamarisk wood. The boat is light, flexible, and buoyant, perfect for these calm waters. The Greeks would later call such crafts papyrine boats, and Herodotus himself wrote about them in the 5th century BCE, marveling at their construction. Of course, he also got some details wrong. He thought the Egyptians used papyrus ropes instead of wood for ship seams, which, well, they didn't. But we'll give him credit. He was trying. You pick up a discarded stalk and snap it. The sound is clean, crisp. Inside, the white pith gleams, soft and fibrous. You think about all the hands that will soon touch this, the workers who'll peel it, the artisans who'll layer it, the scribes who'll turn it into language. Each person adds a step, a heartbeat, until this plant becomes something greater, a vessel for thought. The idea that plants could store ideas seems ordinary now. You scroll through your phone every day, swiping through words on glass. But 5,000 years ago, this was revolutionary. Before papyrus, writing existed mostly on clay tablets, heavy, breakable, and difficult to transport. The invention of a portable, flexible writing surface meant thoughts could travel. Empires could be administered, stories could be copied, knowledge could flow like the Nile itself. Mena stands again, lifting the bundle of reeds onto his shoulder. He nods toward the distant cluster of mud brick huts, the workshop where the next part of the transformation will unfold. You follow, the sun warm on your back, the scent of the delta clinging to your skin. The mud squishes between your toes one last time before you step onto dry land. You glance over your shoulder at the marsh, now glowing gold in the midday light. It's easy to forget that the world's first libraries began right here, not in marble buildings, but in wetlands and riverbanks, with people like Mena, quiet, anonymous, patient. The reeds sway gently, as if waving goodbye. Somewhere in the reeds, a frog croaks twice, like punctuation on a sentence that's taken 5,000 years to write. As you walk toward the workshop, the sound of cutting fades behind you, replaced by the rustle of drying leaves and the faint chatter of villagers. Soon you'll learn what happens when these green stalks meet the edge of a knife and the weight of stone. But for now, take one last breath of the delta air, rich, heavy, ancient. And remember, this is where human memory first took root. The heat is heavier now, the kind that wraps around you like a thick linen shawl. You follow Mena and his small group of workers along a dusty path toward the edge of the marsh, where the reeds give way to firm, cracked soil. The air smells of sun-baked earth and waterweed. Ahead, a cluster of low huts huddles together, their mud brick walls streaked with salt from years of Nile floods. The rhythmic thudding of tools drifts through the still air, papyrus harvesters at work. The village hums with quiet industry. Chickens cluck near the doorways, children chase each other through patches of shade, and smoke purls lazily from clay ovens. Mena lays down his bundle of fresh-cut stalks beside several others stacked neatly in rows. You join him as he begins sorting them by size, color, and firmness. The longer, thicker reeds will be destined for scroll making. The smaller, weaker ones will end up as basket fiber, mats, or fuel for cooking fires. Nothing here goes to waste. You crouch beside the pile and run your fingers along one stalk. It's still damp from the marsh, and under the green skin, you can see faint striations where the pale pith begins. Mena picks up a curved knife, its bronze edge dulled by years of use, and slices through the stalk with practiced ease. He makes short, swift cuts, stripping off the outer green rind in long ribbons that curl to the ground like thin snakes. The exposed interior gleams white and wet, almost luminous under the sun. It's strange. Something so unremarkable at first glance now looks like treasure. The papyrus pith feels cool between your fingertips, almost silky. Mena hands you a strip to hold, and you realize it's both delicate and surprisingly tough. He motions for you to smell it. There's a faint sweetness, like cucumber mixed with river water. You watch as more workers gather around, each repeating the same steps. They work rhythmically, chatting in low tones, the soft scrape of knives mingling with birdsong. It's meditative, the kind of work that slows time without stopping it. Occasionally someone laughs, probably at the clumsy foreigner, you, who nearly drops an entire stalk into the mud. Fair enough. The process looks simple, but it's all about precision. The goal is to remove only the green rind while keeping the inner fibers intact. Cut too shallow, and the strips will be weak. Too deep, and the sheet will turn patchy. It's a craft passed down through generations, one that demanded patience long before patience was a hashtag. As the workers peel away the green skin, piles of discarded rind collect beside them, glowing like emerald ribbons under the light. Some will later be used as twine or animal feed. You take a moment to appreciate the quiet logic of it all. Every piece of the plant serving a purpose, every step a whisper of efficiency refined over centuries. Historians still argue whether papyrus production began as a household art or an organized industry. Some evidence from Old Kingdom tomb paintings shows women making papyrus sheets in small domestic settings, while other depictions from later periods suggest state-run workshops supplying temples and government scribes. Either way, the art of papyrus making spread quickly across Egypt, from humble river villages like this one to the grand cities along the Nile. You can almost imagine a royal decree being written hundreds of miles away in Memphis or Thebes, all starting with this exact moment, someone stripping the skin off a plant. It's a humbling thought. The origins of bureaucracy and poetry alike sitting here in the sun, smelling faintly of riverweed. Mena pauses, points to a section of the pith he's just peeled, and then to the bundle drying in the corner. "Dry," he says softly, gesturing for you to feel the difference. The older strips are firmer, less flexible, and their surface slightly fibrous to the touch. These will be cut into even thinner layers before they're arranged into sheets. You nod, pretending to fully understand, though in truth you're mostly distracted by the nearby donkey that appears to be giving you a deeply judgmental stare. He grins. Yes, even 5,000 years ago, people laughed at tourists, and returns to work. The peeled strips are now carried to a long, flat table, shaded by woven palm leaves. Here, women rinse them in shallow basins of Nile water, washing away any remaining sap or dirt. The strips glisten as they catch the light, translucent and pale. You dip your hands into the basin and feel the cool water rush between your fingers. Somewhere beneath that same river surface, crocodiles and catfish swim, unaware that this quiet industry above them will one day change the course of human thought. Nearby, a young apprentice tests the flexibility of each strip, bending it slightly. If it cracks, it's discarded. If it bends smoothly, it's placed carefully on a woven mat to dry. He moves methodically, almost ceremonially. You can tell this process hasn't changed in thousands of years. Its rhythm is the same now as it was when scribes first inked hymns to Ra or accounts of temple offerings. As you watch the workers, your mind wanders to the way humans always seem to find creativity in repetition. What started as simple harvesting has become an art form, a way to turn nature into permanence. That's the beauty of papyrus. It's not loud or dramatic. It doesn't demand attention. It just becomes something greater through patience and care. You reach for one of the fresh strips drying in the sun and hold it up to your eye. The fibers catch the light, showing faint vertical lines. It's easy to imagine how, soon, these will form the vertical texture on the finished sheet, the subtle grain that guided ancient scribes' hands. You rub your thumb along it. It feels smooth but alive, like the skin of something that still remembers the river. Mena wipes his brow and gestures toward a pile of finished stalks stacked neatly to dry. They'll rest there until the afternoon, when the next stage begins, slicing the pith into even thinner strips to form the layers of the future scroll. The smell of the reeds grows stronger as they warm under the sun, filling the air with that fresh, grassy aroma. A goat bleats somewhere in the distance. Children laugh as they chase each other between drying mats, occasionally earning a gentle scolding from an elder. You sit back, feeling the warmth of the ground through your clothes. Everything around you moves at a different pace, a deliberate slowness that makes you feel both calm and impossibly small. It's funny to think that so much of human history owes itself to this moment, to the act of peeling. Without this transformation, there would be no written prayers and tombs, no records of pharaohs, no preserved poems about lost loves. Without papyrus, so much of the ancient world might have dissolved into the river, gone without a trace. You look again at the workers, their movements smooth and assured. The soft scrape of knives continues like a heartbeat. A breeze stirs the drying strips, and for a moment they almost sound like whispers, thin, papery voices rustling secrets of dynasties long gone. You smile, letting the sound lull you. There's comfort in this simplicity, in the idea that creation doesn't always need fire or invention. Sometimes it just needs a reed, a knife, and a little patience. The sun edges lower, turning the water channels into bands of molten gold. The workers start to gather the finished pith strips, bundling them carefully for the next step. You rise, stretching your legs, brushing off the dust from your knees. The day's rhythm slows as people prepare for the evening meal. But you can already feel the next chapter of transformation waiting, the moment when these humble strips will begin to resemble something truly remarkable, the first sheets of human memory. The next morning begins with that same heavy stillness that always seems to linger before the Nile's heat wakes fully. You've returned to the little workshop near the edge of the village, where the bundles of papyrus pith now wait, pale and clean, stacked neatly like rolls of fresh dough. The scent of the reeds fills the air, sweet, vegetal, almost like cucumbers left to dry in the sun. Somewhere nearby, a rooster is doing its best impression of an alarm clock that's had too much coffee. Mena greets you with a nod and gestures toward a flat wooden table smoothed from years of use. It's here that the next transformation begins, the careful slicing of the papyrus pith into thin, even strips. You watch as he picks up one stalk and places it horizontally before him. With a sharp bronze knife, he cuts through the stalk lengthwise, splitting it open. The sound is crisp, clean, like the tearing of fresh fabric. Inside, the pith gleams white and damp. He begins to slice it into narrow ribbons, each one barely thicker than a reed pen. The motion is smooth, precise, practiced, a kind of craftsmanship that looks simple until you try it yourself, which of course you do. Mena hands you the knife, smiling with the resigned patience of a man who knows what's about to happen. You make your first cut and promptly create something that looks less like a ribbon and more like a papyrus crime scene. He laughs quietly, shakes his head, and fixes your mistake with 2 quick strokes. "Soft hand," he murmurs, guiding your wrist. You try again, this time pressing less, letting the blade glide instead of dig. The knife slides easily, and a clean strip falls away. It's oddly satisfying. You can see why people did this for hours on end. There's a rhythm to it, a soft whisper of steel on pith, the steady pulse of the craftsman's breath, the way the sunlight gleams off the moist fibers. The freshly sliced strips are laid out side by side on a smooth board. You can already see the plan forming. They'll be arranged into layers, crisscrossing each other like threads in fabric. But for now, they must be kept damp. Too dry and they'll crack, too wet and they'll rot. Mena sprinkles a little water from a clay bowl and covers the strips with palm leaves to keep them from drying too quickly in the sun. As you watch, an older woman, her hands calloused but graceful, joins the table and begins to peel her own batch with astonishing speed. Her knife flickers like a fishtail. She hums as she works, a slow tune that feels ancient, though it could just as easily be something she made up this morning. The melody fits the scene perfectly, gentle, unhurried, cyclical. Historians still argue whether papyrus making was considered a lowly craft or a respected art. Some ancient reliefs depict workers like Mena in simple kilts, bending over benches in what look like humble workshops. But other evidence suggests that papyrus artisans were valued for their skill, especially when creating the fine quality sheets used for temple documents or royal decrees. The best papyrus was soft, uniform, and smooth, no visible joins, no rough edges. You get the sense that perfection here wasn't optional, it was tradition. You take a step outside for air. The village hums with life. Children chase each other past drying racks. Women kneel by the river, washing bundles of fibers. The papyrus plant is everywhere, woven into mats, tied into fences, even used as makeshift hats by the kids. The whole community seems built from the same reed. You dip your hand into the Nile again, feeling the cool current slide past your fingers. It's hard not to marvel at how much this river gave. Every year, its floodwaters brought silt and renewal, the perfect conditions for papyrus to thrive. Without it, Egypt might never have become the land of writing, math, and bureaucracy. Without papyrus, history itself might have been just another spoken rumor lost to time. When you return to the table, Mena is ready for the next step, laying the strips. He places a flat stone slab on the workbench, sprinkles it lightly with water, and begins to arrange the first layer of papyrus ribbons vertically, each one overlapping the next slightly. Then he takes another set of strips and lays them horizontally across the first, weaving a subtle crisscross pattern. The two layers cling to each other instantly, the natural sap in the fibers acting as glue. It's mesmerizing to watch, the pale, damp fibers gliding into place, forming what will soon become the surface of a page. You can already see faint patterns where the strips overlap, like a hidden grid waiting to hold words. You lean closer and catch that faint, sweet smell again, the scent of something alive turning slowly into memory. Mena smooths the surface gently with the flat of his hand, pressing out air bubbles and adjusting any edges that stick out. The sheet looks delicate, but there's strength there, a quiet resilience that feels symbolic somehow. Humanity's first great record keeper isn't marble or bronze. It's this soft, fragile network of plant fibers that somehow refuses to fall apart. The older woman takes over next, pressing a smooth, flat shell across the surface to level it out. She moves with practiced ease, humming her same tune. Each pass of the shell makes the fibers bond more tightly together. You realize she's not just making a sheet, she's building continuity, a bridge between life and story, plant and permanence. The workshop smells faintly of water and earth. Outside, the sun climbs higher, and the distant sound of temple drums floats on the breeze. You picture scribes in white linen robes somewhere far downriver, sitting cross-legged before stacks of scrolls. They have no idea that their clean, crisp pages began here, with mud, sweat, laughter, and a little river sap. Mena gestures for you to help lay another sheet. You carefully position one strip after another, trying to match his precision. The work demands focus, but it's strangely calming. Every fiber you place feels like a promise, something small that will carry something vast. Somewhere deep in the back of your mind, you realize this is the world's first act of data storage. Take that, cloud computing. As you finish your layer, Mena nods approvingly and sets a stone slab atop the wet sheet. The weight will press the fibers together overnight, fusing them into one smooth surface. He wipes his hands on his kilt, his face shining with sweat but contentment too. For him, this is just another day. For you, it feels like watching humanity invent permanence. You sit down beside the stack of pressed sheets and close your eyes for a moment. The air buzzes softly with the hum of insects. You can feel the faint vibration of life in everything around you. The river, the plants, even the warm stone beneath your palms. It's as if the entire landscape is whispering the same secret, that every enduring thing begins as something small, fragile, and tended by hand. When you open your eyes again, the first completed sheet is being lifted from the press. It gleams faintly, still damp, but already you can see its promise. The surface is uneven, sure, but smooth enough to take ink. A smile creeps across your face as you run a finger along its edge. From plant to page, it's a kind of quiet alchemy, one that doesn't need fire or magic, just water, pressure, patience, and the will to remember. And in that moment, standing under the Egyptian sun with your hands still sticky with sap, you can't help but think, This is where writing stopped being a miracle and became a craft. By the next morning, the workshop has filled again with the low murmur of voices and the soft clatter of tools. The air is warm, already touched by the day's heat, and the faint smell of damp reeds still lingers. You enter to find Mena and the older woman, the one who hums, already at work. The papyrus sheets that had been pressed under smooth stones overnight now rest on a flat rack, drying in the early light. You approach quietly, watching as Mena lifts the first sheet. It peels away from its stone weight with a gentle sigh, like parchment exhaling after a long sleep. The surface glows with a faint sheen, creamy and fibrous, the faint weave of vertical and horizontal strips visible beneath the light. He holds it up for you to see, and even though you've watched every part of its creation, the finished result still feels like something miraculous. It's firm but flexible, smooth but organic, somewhere between cloth and wood. You run your fingers across it carefully. The texture is subtly uneven, a reminder that this was once living matter. The scent is faintly earthy, like dried grass after rain. For a brief moment, you imagine the generations of scribes who would one day unroll sheets like this and fill them with inked hieroglyphs, preserving laws, stories, prayers, and dreams. Now, Mena says, smiling slightly, we polish. He gestures for you to follow him to another table, this one covered with small tools, smooth stones, pieces of ivory, and tiny shells that glint in sunlight. The woman takes one of the papyrus sheets, still slightly damp, and begins to rub it gently with a polished stone in long, circular motions. The sound is soft and rhythmic, like the purr of a cat. This makes it ready for ink, Mena explains. If it is too rough, the ink will bleed. Too smooth, and it will not hold. You nod, mesmerized by the process. It's another delicate balance. Too much pressure, and the sheet might tear. Too little, and it will stay coarse. You take a turn yourself, pressing the stone against the papyrus in slow, measured circles. The sheet warms under your touch, the fibers tightening, bonding. After a few minutes, it feels smoother, more unified, a surface ready to carry words. When you step back, you see dozens of sheets drying in the sun, their pale surfaces gleaming faintly. It strikes you again just how patient this entire process is. Each step requires waiting, watching, trusting the elements to do their part. It's a form of craftsmanship that's less about control and more about partnership with the plant, the river, the air, and time itself. Mena sets aside a stack of completed sheets, then picks up a handful of papyrus scraps from the floor. Nothing is wasted, he says, tossing them into a small basket. These we use for rough writing or for the fire when it grows cold. The thought makes you pause. Even in their imperfections, even in the fragments, there's utility. It's an idea that feels deeply Egyptian, the balance of use and symbolism, of the sacred and the practical. Outside, the sounds of the village drift through the open doorway. A donkey brays, a potter calls to his apprentice, and the steady beat of a hammer echoes from somewhere nearby. Life here flows like the river, endlessly repeating, always familiar, yet always moving forward. By midday, the sheets are fully dried. Mena gathers several together and begins to trim their edges with a bronze blade, squaring them neatly. Each cut is deliberate, ensuring uniformity for when they're joined into longer scrolls. The papyrus crackles faintly under the knife. He explains that individual sheets are rarely used alone. Instead, scribes glue them end to end using a paste made from flour and water, or sometimes from the same papyrus sap that binds the fibers. As he speaks, he demonstrates, brushing a thin line of adhesive along one edge, pressing another sheet against it, and smoothing the join with his fingers. The seam disappears almost completely. Once dry, the scroll will be rolled carefully around a slender wooden rod, ready for writing, ready for history. It's almost impossible not to think of what will one day be written here. Laws of pharaohs, temple hymns, trade accounts, letters between officials, poems whispered between lovers. Every human thought, sacred or mundane, might find its way onto this humble surface. You realize that what began as a plant in a marsh has now become humanity's first library shelf. As the afternoon wears on, Mena invites you to sit beside him at another table. He pulls out a thin reed pen, its tip cut at an angle and dipped into a small pot of ink made from soot and gum. On one of the finished sheets, he begins to draw slow, deliberate lines, marks that form into shapes you recognize as hieroglyphs. The ink flows smoothly. The papyrus drinks it without smudging. You can see how well the surface was prepared, how the polishing has created just the right tension between absorbent and resistant. He writes the word ankh, life. Then he slides the pen toward you. Try, he says simply. You take it, your hand slightly trembling, and dip the nib into the ink. It feels like holding something ancient and alive. You make your first mark, an awkward curve that bleeds too much at the edge. Mena chuckles softly but doesn't correct you. You try again, this time slower, steadier. The symbol takes shape, and though imperfect, it carries a quiet dignity. Every word begins this way, Mena says, from the hand, from the reed. You sit back and look at the black ink drying against the pale papyrus. The contrast is beautiful, stark yet soft. You imagine entire scrolls filled with such writing, rolled and stored in temple archives, preserved in the dry air for thousands of years. Even now, somewhere under desert sand, there might be a sheet made by hands like Mena's, still holding the thoughts of someone who lived and breathed under the same sun. The day begins to fade, the light turning gold and heavy. The workshop glows softly, the papyrus sheets catching the warm rays like mirrors of the Nile itself. Mena and the woman finish stacking the last of the scrolls, wrapping them in linen cloth. The hum of the village quiets. Soon it will be time for the evening meal. You sit by the doorway, watching the river glint in the distance. The reeds sway gently, their tips gilded by sunset. For the first time, you understand something that no book can truly teach. That history isn't just written about people like Mena, it's written by them, in every sense of the word. The kings and scribes may have taken the credit, but without these patient hands, without this daily ritual of cutting and pressing and polishing, the grand words of empires would have vanished with the wind. A cool breeze drifts in from the river. The woman hums her tune again, quieter now, like a lullaby for the day's end. You can feel the rhythm of it, the same rhythm that's run through every moment since you arrived. Work, patience, renewal, the steady pulse of creation. Mena sits beside you, silent for a while, then says softly, "When you write, you live twice, once when you speak, once when you remember." You nod, understanding. This entire process, the cutting of reeds, the pressing of fibers, the smoothing of sheets, isn't just about making something to write on. It's about preserving that second life, the one born in memory. As dusk deepens, you look out over the marshes where the papyrus grows wild and endless. You think of all the scrolls that will one day carry stories of gods and kings, of births and deaths, of love and loss. And somewhere among them, perhaps, the quiet story of how it all began, with a craftsman named Mena, a humming woman, and the whispering reeds of the Nile. The next morning greets you with a wash of golden light spilling over the Nile. You stretch, still feeling the slight stiffness from yesterday's work. Your hands remember the rhythm of rubbing papyrus smooth, the gentle scrape of stone over reed. When you step outside, the air carries that unmistakable scent, sweet, muddy, and alive. It's the smell of the river's breath, the smell of creation itself. Mena is already there, crouched beside a new batch of papyrus strips. His hair is damp with sweat, and his tunic clings to his shoulders. "Today," he says, not looking up, "we teach patience." You soon learn that what he means is waiting. waiting for nature to do its slow, invisible work. The sheets, once pressed and layered, must now dry under the sun's careful eye. Too little drying, and the papyrus remains weak, bending or tearing when rolled. Too much, and it turns brittle, cracking like old pottery. He gestures toward the courtyard, where yesterday's creations lie flat beneath smooth stones. The stones are arranged in neat geometric patterns, almost beautiful in their symmetry. They glint faintly, already hot from the morning rays. The smell rising from beneath them is faintly sweet, like baked hay. You crouch and lift one of the stones carefully. Beneath it, the papyrus sheet glows pale and firm, its edges curling slightly as moisture escapes. It's astonishing how the strips, once soft and green, have fused into something solid and whole. The plant is gone, but its spirit, its texture, its strength remains. Mena nods approvingly. "The sun knows better than we do," he says. He tells you that ancient workers often sang as they pressed and dried papyrus, not for any ceremonial reason, just because the rhythm helped them time the process. A song's length marked when to move the stones or turn the sheets. You imagine a dozen voices rising over the marshes, blending with the rustle of reeds and the murmur of the river. It's easy to see how such habits could become tradition, ritual born from repetition. You decide to hum a little yourself as you watch. The melody isn't Egyptian, more like something you'd sing absent-mindedly while washing dishes, but it fits. The soft breeze carries your tune over the courtyard. Mena looks up and grins, probably recognizing that the language of rhythm never really changes, even across millennia. After an hour, he invites you to check another batch, one that's been drying since dawn. You lift the stones sheet by sheet. Some are ready, others still cling to their dampness, darker around the edges. It's subtle, this difference, but Mena sees it instantly. "These will wait," he says, stacking the still moist ones carefully aside. "Patience is the price of permanence." That phrase lingers in your head like a proverb. Patience is the price of permanence. You can almost hear it carved into temple walls, beside hieroglyphs of gods and kings. Maybe that's why papyrus endured when so many other materials faded. It demanded respect. While the sheets rest, Mena leads you to another part of the workshop where water troughs bubble faintly. Here, the leftover papyrus fibers, the ones too small or irregular for proper sheets, float lazily on the surface. The water glistens, thickened with sap and residue. The smell is sharp and earthy. "These are for lesser uses," Mena explains. "Rough writing, wrapping, or padding, but still they serve." He swirls the mixture with a stick, creating lazy spirals of greenish pulp. Even the scraps have stories. It's one of those moments where you realize how holistic ancient crafts truly were. Nothing wasted, every stage connected. You find yourself thinking about how modern life often skips the middle, the waiting, the slow becoming, and jumps straight to results. Here, though, each hour has meaning. The sun climbs higher, and the heat presses down. You and Mena retreat into the shade, drinking cool water from clay jars. Across the courtyard, the papyrus sheets shimmer faintly, the air around them warping with heat. They seem alive, breathing, shrinking into form. Mena begins to tell you stories, half history, half myth. He says the papyrus plant was once sacred to the god Thoth, patron of writing and wisdom. Scribes would offer the first sheet of each batch to him, leaving it on temple steps as a gift. Some said Thoth's breath made the ink flow smoothly. Others claimed the god himself whispered ideas into a writer's ear as their pen moved. Historians still argue, Mena adds with a smirk, whether such offerings were symbolic or superstition. I say both. What is wisdom if not a mix of faith and ink? You smile. It's an oddly profound thought for such a simple statement. He tells you another story, a quirkier one this time. In some records, it's said that papyrus sheets were sometimes scented with oils or resins, especially when made for royal archives. Not because they needed to smell nice, but because the aroma helped repel insects and mold. Imagine that! Scrolls perfumed like incense, carrying not just words, but the faint memory of frankincense or cedar. The air in those ancient libraries must have smelled divine. You lean back against a wall, half dreaming as Mena's voice drifts over you. Outside, the river sparkles, and the reeds whisper. It's so easy to feel drowsy here, in this timeless workshop where everything moves at the pace of the sun. By late afternoon, the drying is nearly done. Mena lifts each sheet one last time, inspecting the color and texture. They're perfect, sturdy, pale, flexible. You can see the faint imprint of the stones, like ancient fingerprints left by time. "These are ready," he says softly. "Tomorrow we polish again." But before he sets them aside, he invites you to feel one, really feel it. The papyrus is warm to the touch, faintly rough but resilient. You bend it slightly and it bends back like it's alive. You can almost sense the plant's old strength still lingering within it, the memory of standing tall among the reeds. Mena chuckles when you mention this. "The plant remembers the wind," he says. "That is why it does not break." You both fall silent, listening to the wind outside, the same wind that once rippled across the marshes. It's a quiet, sacred sort of moment, the kind that sneaks up on you when you're not looking. As the evening shadows lengthen, the temperature drops, and the smell of cooking fires begins to drift from the nearby homes. The workers start to pack up, stacking the finished sheets in careful piles. Someone jokes about how the scribes will soon complain if the surface isn't perfect. Mena laughs, rolling his eyes. They always do. Scribes love to curse the maker when their pen stutters. You can't help but smile, picturing a cranky scribe, centuries from now, muttering over one of these very sheets because of a small bump or grain. Yet that tiny imperfection might be the reason the document survives, stronger, thicker, more stubborn than the rest. When the last sheet is covered for the night, Mena sits on a stool, wiping his hands on his tunic. "Do you know," he says quietly, "that even in death, papyrus remains with us?" You tilt your head, curious. He explains that the same plant was used in the making of funerary garlands, sometimes even in the wrappings of mummies. Its fibers appeared in sandals, mats, baskets, and even small boats. In life, papyrus carried words. In death, it carried the body. It is the river's child, he says, and the river never forgets. You sit with that thought for a long moment, letting the twilight gather around you. It's humbling to realize how something so simple, a reed in a marsh, can hold so many forms of memory. The last light glows over the Nile, a silver mirror stretching endlessly westward. The reeds sway in silhouette, black against gold. The air hums with quiet, cicadas, ripples, faint voices from distant boats. You feel the day's warmth finally ease from your skin. In that stillness, it's easy to imagine the first people who ever pressed reeds into sheets like this, discovering by accident what time would later call invention. Maybe they didn't even think of it as genius, just necessity, curiosity, the slow unfolding of patience. Somewhere in the fading light, the whisper of the river answers back, low and eternal. And you realize that this long, patient transformation isn't just the story of papyrus. It's the story of humankind learning to listen, to shape, to leave something behind that speaks when voices are gone. The wind cools. The air darkens. And as Mena covers the last pile of sheets for the night, he says softly, "Tomorrow, the words will come." The next morning begins with the rustle of linen, the smell of smoke, and the faint chatter of doves in the eaves. You wake to find the courtyard already alive with movement. Workers carrying bundles of dried papyrus, Mena at his usual post, and the hum of work drifting through the air like bees around a hive. The sheets you helped make yesterday now rest in tidy stacks, their pale surfaces gleaming faintly in the morning light. Today, Mena says, is about perfection. You've shaped the reed into a sheet, pressed it, dried it, but it still isn't ready to hold the written word. A proper surface must be coaxed into existence, polished until the ink will flow as smoothly as water down the Nile. You follow him inside where the room is cooler, shaded by woven mats. The work table before you gleams with simple tools: stones, shells, a few pieces of ivory, and small cloths soaked in oil. Mena gestures toward the sheets. "They're alive until you smooth them," he says with a grin. "After that, they belong to the words." He picks up a shell and begins to rub the papyrus with slow, practiced circles. The motion is almost hypnotic. The faint scrape fills the air, soft and rhythmic, like a whisper on parchment. The dull, fibrous texture begins to shine under his hand. It's not glossy, just subtly reflective, like river water under sunlight. You take a turn, and the sensation is oddly satisfying. The papyrus resists you at first, then slowly yields, becoming silkier beneath your fingers. Mena nods. "Don't rush it," he murmurs. "The papyrus will tell you when it's ready." He's right. There's a point when you can feel the difference. The surface no longer rough or sticky, but firm and forgiving. You run your palm across it and imagine a scribe's pen gliding effortlessly over the fibers. The thought gives you a quiet thrill. Outside, someone hums a work tune. You can hear the rhythmic splash of water as others wash new batches of reed. The workshop smells faintly of damp grass, dust, and sweat. Earthly, grounded, real. "Historians still argue," Mena says suddenly, breaking your focus, "whether the Egyptians invented papyrus polishing themselves or borrowed the technique from earlier crafts, like smoothing wood or pottery." He shrugs, smiling. "I think polishing is just human nature. We always want to make things shine." You laugh softly, realizing he's probably right. From obsidian mirrors to smartphone screens, we've been polishing reflections of ourselves for millennia. He shows you the next step, a finer rubbing, this time with a smooth river pebble. "This part," he says, "is like speaking softly to the page. If you rush, it'll crack. If you're gentle, it'll remember." You lean closer, fascinated by the patience this process demands. Each stroke takes minutes, each sheet hours. No shortcuts, no machines, just human touch and time. The repetition becomes meditative. You lose yourself in the motion, the steady rhythm, the faint rasp of stone against reed. By midday, your hands ache faintly, but you finished your first complete sheet. It looks different now, stronger, lighter, almost luminous. Mena holds it up to the sunlight, examining it like a proud father. "See," he says, "it's not just paper, it's promise." The phrase lingers. Promise, because each sheet waits to be filled. You think about how much of human memory once rested on these fragile surfaces. Poetry, laws, maps, dreams. Papyrus was never just a material. It was a bridge between thought and eternity. To demonstrate, Mena takes one of the polished sheets and dips his reed pen into a small pot of ink. He writes a line in careful hieratic script. The ink glides perfectly, no blotting, no bleeding. The characters gleam wet for a moment, then settle into the fibers as if they were always meant to be there. "That," he says softly, "is why we polish." You notice the ink is darker than before, almost black with a hint of blue. Mena explains that it's made from soot mixed with water and a touch of gum arabic. And sometimes, he adds with a mischievous glint, with a drop of wine if the scribe is feeling poetic. You can't help but chuckle. Does that make the writing better? "Only if he drinks the rest first," Mena replies, deadpan. The older woman from earlier, the one who always hums, chuckles from across the room. She joins you, polishing a sheet of her own. "He says that every time," she mutters. "Never once wrote anything poetic himself." Mena pretends not to hear her, which only makes you laugh harder. As the day stretches on, the work continues in steady rhythm. Each sheet is inspected, polished, stacked. The light in the room shifts gradually from gold to amber to soft rose as the sun slides westward. Dust motes float lazily through the air, catching the glow like tiny stars. You pause now and then to stretch your hands, gazing out at the Nile through the open doorway. The reeds along the banks sway gently in the breeze. You can almost see the connection between the living plants and the polished sheets, one wild, one tamed, both part of the same endless cycle. Mena breaks the silence with another story. Did you know, he says, some papyrus makers believed the plant held the soul of the river? That when you cut it, you had to whisper thanks, or the Nile would rise in anger. You raise an eyebrow. Did you whisper thanks? He grins. Every time, usually after I've stubbed my toe on a stone. The woman hums louder, pretending to ignore him again. You realize how seamlessly humor lives beside devotion in this world. There's reverence, but never solemnity. An understanding that the sacred and the ordinary aren't opposites, but companions. By late afternoon, the first full stack of finished papyrus stands neatly tied with twine. Mena runs his hand over the top sheet with quiet pride. Perfect, he says, fit for a scribe of the temple or a dreamer by the river. You notice he sets one imperfect sheet aside. Its surface has a small tear near the edge, nothing dramatic. Still, he treats it carefully. This one, he says, we'll keep for practice. The scribes will need something to test their pens. You find yourself drawn to that idea, that even mistakes have purpose. The thought feels comforting, human. The sun dips lower, shadows lengthen, and a faint coolness creeps into the air. Someone outside begins to play a reed flute, its notes drifting lazily across the courtyard. It's hauntingly beautiful, simple, repetitive, like a lullaby. The sound mingles with the scent of roasting grain from a nearby hearth. As you listen, you think about the connection between the flute and the papyrus before you. Both born of reeds, both instruments of expression, one for sound, one for words, the same plant singing in two languages. Mena seems to read your thoughts. The reed gives voice to gods and people alike, he says quietly. That's why we treat it gently. You nod, suddenly feeling a strange affection for the humble papyrus plant. It's no longer just material. It's a living thread that ties together music, writing, memory, and the river itself. The day's work winds down. The sheets are stacked, the tools cleaned, the room swept. As twilight deepens, Mena extinguishes a small oil lamp and turns toward the doorway. Tomorrow, he says, we'll begin joining the sheets. You'll see how a page becomes a story. You follow him outside, where the sky glows violet and gold. The Nile glimmers like molten metal, and the reeds sway in silhouette. The hum of insects fills the air. You feel calm, almost weightless, as if time itself has slowed to the rhythm of the river. Somewhere, a heron calls, low and distant. You close your eyes for a moment and breathe it all in, the warmth, the scent, the soft sounds of work winding down. It occurs to you that the papyrus, too, is winding down from its own long day of transformation, from plant to fiber, from fiber to page, and soon from page to words, thoughts, and dreams. In that moment, you realize that you're no longer just an observer in this story. You're part of the process, a link in a chain that began thousands of years ago and still continues in the quiet turning of each page, each scroll, each breath. You look once more at the gleaming sheets stacked neatly on the table, waiting for their ink and their destiny. They gleam faintly in the torchlight, whispering of what's yet to come. And as night settles gently over the Nile, you think you can almost hear the faint rustle of papyrus reeds, like pages turning in a story too old to end. The next day begins not in the workshop, but in a quieter corner of the temple complex, a place where the scent of incense hangs heavy in the air, and the soft tap of reed pens fills the silence like gentle rain. You follow Mena through a shaded passage lined with carved columns, each one etched with hieroglyphs that shimmer in the morning light. The air feels cool here, almost sacred. This, he says softly, is where the words meet the papyrus. You step into a long room. sunlight streaming through lattice windows, falling across low desks covered in scrolls and jars of ink. A handful of scribes sit cross-legged on woven mats, their heads bent in deep concentration. The rhythmic scratch-scratch of pen on papyrus blends with the occasional murmur of a line being read aloud. It's a kind of music, a language of its own. Mena greets one of the scribes, a lean man with ink-stained fingers and a thin reed tucked behind his ear. The man nods to you with mild curiosity, as if seeing newcomers isn't unusual, but never quite ordinary either. He gestures for you to come closer. You kneel beside him, and he slides a sheet of papyrus forward. Its surface gleams faintly in the sunlight, the very same kind of sheet you helped make. He dips the reed pen into a small pot of ink and, with quick, confident strokes, begins to write. The symbols unfold like tiny artworks, birds, eyes, wavy lines, each mark precise, each curve deliberate. You watch in silence, entranced by the movement. The ink flows perfectly, dark and smooth. The papyrus accepts it eagerly, as though the words have been waiting for this exact moment to be born. Every mark must be balanced, the scribe murmurs without looking up. Too much pressure and the tip splits, too little and the word fades. You nod, remembering Mena's words about patience. Here too, everything depends on rhythm and control. Writing, like pressing papyrus, is a dance of restraint. He finishes a line and blows gently across the surface to dry the ink. Historians still argue, he says, almost absently, whether our ink or our hands are the truer art. Then he smirks. But the ink never complains about the heat. You can't help but smile. Even among these solemn scribes, humor flickers like a small flame. Mena introduces you as an apprentice of the papyrus craft. The scribe, whose name, you learn, is Dedi, nods thoughtfully. Then you are our partner in eternity, he says. Without your work, our words are only air. That thought lodges somewhere deep in your chest. You glance around at the scrolls piled in wicker baskets, each one rolled tightly and sealed with clay. These are not just records, they're containers of memory. Somewhere in these scrolls lie royal decrees, temple hymns, tax accounts, and love letters that will outlast the hands that wrote them. Dedi offers you the reed pen. Go on, he says, write. Your pulse quickens a little. You dip the pen into the ink, carefully this time, remembering how Mena told you to feel the balance between flow and friction. The first mark you make is shaky, but the papyrus guides you gently. Soon you draw another, then another. The shapes form slowly, uneven but legible. Not bad, Dedi says approvingly. You write like a man who listens. That line catches you off guard. It feels like a compliment and a riddle at once. Around you, the other scribes continue their silent work. Some copy texts from older scrolls, others compose letters dictated by priests. Every so often, one pauses to sharpen his reed, slicing the tip at a careful angle before returning to his script. You notice that each scribe keeps several types of ink, black for everyday writing, red for titles, divine names, or emphasis. The jars are small, the brushes worn, yet every mark they make feels deliberate and enduring. Mena watches the scene with quiet pride. Papyrus and ink, he murmurs, the bones and the blood. Outside, the temple courtyard hums with distant chanting. You can smell the faint sweetness of lotus blossoms drifting through the open doorway. The air is warm, filled with the soft buzz of flies and the occasional clink of pottery. Dedi sets his pen down and leans back. You know, he says, some say that every word written on papyrus carries a bit of the writer's ka, their spirit. That's why we're careful. Too many mistakes and your spirit gets confused. He grins. I prefer to blame my handwriting instead. You laugh quietly. So, does that mean every scroll is haunted? Only the boring ones, he says with a wink. The older scribe across the room snorts without looking up. Then all of yours must be. Laughter ripples through the chamber, quick but warm, then fades back into the gentle rustle of pens and pages. After a while, you begin to notice how the scrolls are organized. Each one is labeled at the end with a brief summary or title, something like Accounts of the Temple Granaries or Prayers for the New Flood. The writing is neat and uniform, and Dedi explains that the first sheet of every scroll is considered the most sacred. That's where the heart begins, he says, and the last sheet is the breath, the release. He opens a newly finished scroll for you to see. The inside gleams with neat columns of hieratic script, perfectly aligned, flowing like water down the page. The ends are trimmed smooth, the joins between sheets nearly invisible. Each sheet, he says, was once a reed in the marsh, and now it holds a king's words. Strange, isn't it? It really is. The transformation feels miraculous, and yet you've seen every step of it with your own eyes. From the mud of the delta to the hands of a scribe, it's a story of patience, precision, and the quiet desire to leave a trace behind. At midday, the temple bells sound, and the scribes pause for rest. Dedi invites you to join him outside in the shade of a palm. He eats dates and bread, washing them down with cool water from a jar. There are people, he says between bites, who think writing is magic, that to name something is to make it real. You chew thoughtfully. And do you believe that? He shrugs. I believe the gods listen more closely when their names are written down. Then, after a pause, he adds, and I believe that if you write about yourself, some part of you keeps living, even if the scroll is buried for 1,000 years. He looks at the palm leaves swaying above. Historians still argue whether words can outlast stone. But between you and me, he smiles faintly, I've never seen a stone that could tell a joke. The rest of the day passes in the rhythm of ink and silence. You help Mena carry finished sheets to the scribes, watch as scrolls are measured and rolled, and listen to Dedi's voice softly reciting lines from the book of Coming Forth by Day. Each verse is a promise, a conversation with eternity. You notice one small quirk among the scribes. Before beginning a new scroll, each dips his fingers into water and flicks a few drops toward the floor. For luck, Dedi explains, and to remind us that all writing flows from the Nile. As the sun dips low, casting amber light through the lattice windows, the day's work winds down. The scribes roll up their finished scrolls, seal them with clay, and mark them with their names. The smell of oil lamps replaces the fading incense. Mena places a hand on your shoulder. Now you've seen how papyrus lives twice, he says, first as a plant, then as a page. Tomorrow, you'll see how it becomes a story that travels farther than the river itself. You look around the quiet room one last time. The stacks of scrolls, the jars of ink, the worn tools, and feel an unexpected affection for the place. This isn't just where history is recorded, it's where it breathes. As you step outside into the cool dusk, the reeds along the river sway in the evening wind. Somewhere out there, the next bundle of papyrus waits to be harvested, already whispering the words that will one day fill its fibers. And under the fading sun, you realize something simple but profound. The scribes don't just write on papyrus, they write with it. Together, plant and pen tell the story of humanity learning to remember. By the time the next morning's sun filters through the temple latticework, you can already smell the faint sweetness of glue boiling somewhere nearby. The air hums with quiet industry, scribes, artisans, and apprentices moving like a well-rehearsed orchestra. Mena greets you at the doorway with a papyrus sheet in each hand, their edges crisp and golden in the light. Today, he says, we make the scroll live. You follow him into a side chamber where half a dozen workers sit around low benches. The floor is littered with papyrus trimmings, thin curls of discarded fiber that crunch softly underfoot. It feels like stepping into a nest of ancient secrets. The hum of the city seems distant here. Only the occasional flap of a pigeon's wings filters through the windows. Mena lays the sheets before you. Each is a slightly different size, but the texture is consistent, smooth from polishing, sturdy yet flexible. He gestures for you to sit. A sheet, he explains, is a thought. A scroll, he pauses, letting the silence stretch, is a memory. You watch as he demonstrates. With the edge of a reed knife, he trims one side of the sheet until the fibers look clean and even. He takes another sheet and aligns the two edges so the fibers overlap just slightly, like scales on a fish. Then, with a delicate brush, he spreads a thin layer of paste, made from flour and water, he explains, along the seam. The smell is faintly nutty, earthy, and comforting. He presses the two sheets together, smooths the join with a polished stone, and waits. Within moments, the seam looks almost invisible. You can run your fingers over it and feel only the faintest ridge. It's strange, you murmur. Something so fragile, yet it might last for thousands of years. Mena smiles. If it's lucky, and if the gods are kind. He hands you a set of sheets. Now you try. Be careful. Too much glue and the fibers warp. Too little and the bond fails. You work slowly, remembering his words. The glue spreads easily, cool against your fingertips. The sheets fit together neatly, the edges aligning with quiet precision. You smooth the seam again and again, until Mena nods in approval. Good, he says. Now imagine doing that 100 times. You glance around the room. The artisans are doing exactly that, joining sheet after sheet, their hands moving in rhythmic motion. Some are making short scrolls for letters or records. Others are crafting enormous rolls for temple archives, stretching meters long. It's hypnotic to watch, this quiet repetition of purpose. One of the artisans, an older woman named Papyrus, works beside you. Her eyes are sharp despite her age. She holds up a nearly completed scroll, perhaps 20 sheets long, and examines it in the light. We leave the edges untrimmed until the very end, she explains. Each scroll must breathe freely before it's finished. You nod, careful not to disturb your own fragile join. Historians still argue, she says, whether the first scrolls were meant for words or for wrapping the dead. She chuckles. Personally, I think both. Words and bodies both need a place to rest. It's an image that lingers, a scroll like a shroud, wrapping stories as lovingly as linen wraps the departed. The work continues. Once your scroll is several sheets long, Mena shows you the next step. With a smooth reed roller, you press along the length of the papyrus, ensuring every seam is flat. The roller makes a soft, rhythmic sound, like rain tapping against a roof. Then you trim the edges carefully, rounding them so the scroll will roll evenly. This, Mena says, is where most mistakes happen. A crooked edge and the whole thing unravels. He demonstrates how to roll the papyrus. Start from the left, smooth as you go, making sure the writing surface faces inward to protect the ink. The finished scroll, once rolled tight, is surprisingly firm, like a small piece of time you can hold in your hand. You try rolling your own, and though it wobbles at first, Mena's patient nod tells you you're learning. Nearby, Dedi the scribe appears, a grin already tugging at his lips. Ah, so this is where my blank canvases are born, he says. Do you know how many of these I fill in a year? Mena smirks. Not enough to pay your ink bill. The two exchange an easy laugh, and Dedi picks up a scroll from the drying rack. You know, he says, turning to you, some scribes keep their own personal scrolls, secret ones, little notes, lists, jokes, things they'd never show a priest. Like what, you ask? Oh, one I found last year had a drawing of a cat stealing fish from a market stall, he says, chuckling. The caption read, "An honest thief." You laugh softly. Even in ancient temples, it seems doodling was alive and well. Dedi examines your freshly joined scroll. He nods approvingly. You'll make the scribes happy with this one. Smooth fibers, tight seam. You'd be surprised how many of us blame our mistakes on the papyrus instead of our handwriting. He lowers his voice slightly. But between us, a good scroll makes bad handwriting look almost noble. By midday, the room glows with golden light, and rows of finished scrolls rest on racks to dry. The smell of paste and sun-warmed fibers fills the air, a strange but soothing perfume. Mena shows you how the finished scrolls are labeled. Each receives a narrow strip glued to its outer edge, with a few identifying hieroglyphs written in red ink. That way, when stored upright in a basket or jar, readers can find the right one without unrolling them all. It's a system both elegant and humble, like most things here. Later, Papyrus carries a finished scroll to a low table, where a wooden rod awaits. This is the umbilicus, she says, the core around which the scroll is wrapped. It keeps the papyrus safe and easy to handle. She attaches the leading edge to the rod, rolls the scroll around it, and ties it neatly with a strip of linen. The scroll now looks complete, compact, self-contained, and oddly alive. Imagine, Mena says quietly, someone unrolling this 1,000 years from now, their fingers touching yours through time. The thought sends a small shiver up your spine, not of fear, but awe. As afternoon drifts toward evening, you step outside for air. Along the riverbank, traders load baskets of papyrus onto small reed boats bound for other cities. Children splash in the shallows, imitating their parents' work with broken stalks and mud. The reeds sway and hiss softly, as if whispering in approval. You sit on a flat rock, watching the boats move downstream. Somewhere, one of your sheets might already be on its way, transformed, inscribed, or soon-to-be. The river carries not only goods, but ideas, and papyrus is its most precious cargo. Mena joins you, settling beside you with a sigh. Do you know, he says, that there were once scrolls so long they filled entire rooms? The great papyrus of Turin, they say, is more than 40 meters. The scribes must have had strong wrists. You grin, and a lot of patience. He nods. Patience, yes, but also faith. Every scroll is a gamble against time. You think about that. The glue drying, the seams holding, the ink resisting decay. Every decision, from harvest to writing, is made with the same quiet hope that the papyrus will outlive its maker. The light fades, painting the marshes in honey-colored hues. The papyrus plants gleam like polished bronze, their tips catching the dying sun. Somewhere a heron croaks, breaking the stillness. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling the day's warmth lingering on your skin. In your mind's eye, the scrolls you've helped create stretch endlessly, linking one life to another, one century to the next. Words pressed between layers of reed and glue, waiting patiently to be heard again. When you open your eyes, Mena is watching the horizon. Tomorrow, he says, you'll see where these scrolls travel. Beyond the river, beyond Egypt itself. The world wants our papyrus, sometimes too much. You glance at the glowing water, and the idea of the scroll's journey across deserts, seas, and time feels both thrilling and fragile. But for now, and this moment, the story of papyrus is still home. It rests in the hands of those who cut it, press it, polish it, and join it, turning nature into memory and memory into permanence. The last light fades. The reeds whisper again, and in the hush between sound and silence, you can almost hear it. The faint crinkle of a scroll being unrolled somewhere far away, a whisper of history carried on the wind. The morning arrives in a soft, golden haze, the air heavy with the scent of wet mud and river lilies. You trudge toward the workshop, your arms still carrying the faint ache from yesterday's labor, but your mind is light, buzzing with anticipation. Today, Mena says, you will witness the scrolls begin their journey beyond the workshop, moving from quiet preparation into the bustling world. Outside, the Nile stretches like a mirror, its surface reflecting the early light and the swaying green of papyrus along the banks. Small boats drift lazily, loaded with clay jars, baskets of grain, and, most precious of all, bundles of rolled papyrus sheets tied neatly with linen strips. Their gentle rocking and soft scraping against each other produce a subtle rhythm, like the heartbeat of the river itself. Mena leads you along a stone path toward the loading area. Workers are already lifting scrolls onto reed rafts, stacking them carefully to prevent crushing. You notice the care with which each bundle is handled. These are fragile after all. Their journey could span weeks, even months. A sharp edge, a sudden jolt, and all the careful labor of pressing, polishing, and joining could be undone in an instant. Handling is half the battle, Mena says, gesturing to a worker who adjusts a bundle of scrolls with meticulous fingers. A scroll does not forgive careless hands. You follow him to a small boat, its flat deck just wide enough to carry a single batch. Mena demonstrates how to secure the scrolls with thin ropes and reed strips. They must be snug, yet not tight enough to damage the delicate fibers. He slides one scroll into your hands, and you marvel at its weight. Surprisingly light, yet imbued with something almost tangible: the memory of the reeds, the sun, the stone, the labor of human hands. Historians still argue whether papyrus trade first began as a local necessity or as a deliberate export, he says quietly. Some claim scribes only ever intended it for temple use. Others insist merchants realized its value long before anyone thought to write a single word. You nod, watching the scrolls rock gently on the boat. It's hard to imagine the implications. Each scroll is more than a record. It's a piece of civilization, a bridge spanning from the marshes of the Nile to distant lands, to people who will never see these reeds growing, yet will rely on their endurance. The boat pushes off slowly, guided by a man with a long pole. The water laps softly against the hull, a delicate percussion. You lean over the side, watching the reflection of papyrus stalks ripple in the current. There's a strange serenity in watching the scrolls begin their journey, as though the river itself is whispering, "Carry these words carefully, they are precious." Mena steps back, motioning for you to observe rather than interfere. Most scrolls never travel alone, he says. They are part of larger shipments: temple archives, royal decrees, letters from officials, contracts for merchants. A scroll without companions is like a song without harmony. You notice that the workers treat each bundle differently. Some carry them upright, nestled in baskets. Others lay them flat, each method designed to protect against moisture, sun, and jostling. Even the simplest oversight could spell disaster, and yet there's a fluid grace to the work, a choreography developed over decades, perfected by trial and error. Papyrus appears beside you, carrying another bundle of scrolls. She hums softly as she walks, a tune that you recognize from the workshop. Even when traveling, she says, Papyrus likes music, helps it settle, I think. You can't help but grin at the thought. Scrolls drifting along the Nile, soot-black ink drying in time to a lullaby of human hums. Mena points toward a distant ferry. Some scrolls will ride these boats for only a few miles, others for hundreds. They go to markets, temple archives, royal scribes, and even foreign lands. You watch as one boat begins its journey, the bundle of papyrus rocking gently on its surface. A small heron lifts from the reeds, and for a moment you swear it glances toward the scrolls, a silent guardian of words. He hands you a smaller scroll. Take this, he says. Imagine it carrying something important, a message, a law, a prayer. Feel its weight in your hands. Even though it's light, it carries a universe. You do as instructed, rolling it gently between your palms. You notice the faint impression of each sheet's join, the smooth polish of the surface, the subtle warmth retained from human touch. Somehow, the scroll feels alive, more than just fibers bound together. Some traders claim, Mena adds, that papyrus sheets can survive storms, sun, even sandstorms. Others swear a sudden rain will ruin an entire shipment. I say it depends on the river and on the care of those carrying it. You nod, staring at the smooth, joined sheets. You imagine a storm rolling across the delta, boats pitching, rafts rocking, water slapping against fragile bundles. And yet, some of these scrolls will endure. They will outlast their makers, their rivers, and even the scribes who inscribed them. Papyrus leans close and whispers, "You'll see one day, a scroll you handled here might end up far away. A scribe in another city, in another land, might touch it and read what you helped create." The idea is almost dizzying. The scrolls are carriers of memory, but memory shared, traveling through space and time. A leaf of papyrus, once cut from the marsh, now part of a network stretching far beyond the Nile, beyond Egypt. A sudden ripple passes over the water. A boat returns from the north, its cargo partially visible. Tightly bound scrolls stacked like miniature obelisks. You imagine the merchants carefully balancing them, each bundle a delicate pyramid of human thought. Mena gestures toward the returning vessel. That is your next lesson: patience and vigilance. The river gives generously, but it can also be cruel. Every scroll that arrives intact is a triumph. You watch silently as the workers unload the scrolls. Each one is inspected, the bindings checked, the edges examined. One scroll is slightly warped from moisture. Someone carefully sets it aside for later drying. Mistakes are tolerated, but only with careful attention. The afternoon drifts by, golden and serene. The river's surface glows, dotted with boats ferrying goods. The reeds along the banks sway lazily in the breeze. Somewhere, a heron dips its beak into the water, disturbing a fleeting reflection. Mena sits beside you on a stone step. "Remember this," he says softly. "A scroll's journey is as important as its creation. The care you take in joining, polishing, and rolling it will determine if it survives. Words are fragile. People, too." You nod quietly, feeling the weight of his words, not as a burden, but as a quiet responsibility. Each scroll is a living testament to patience, precision, and faith. Each one holds a fragment of eternity. As the sun dips lower, the boats begin returning, their cargo balanced and intact. The workers hum in unison, carrying the scrolls to storage, sorting them by destination. The process is slow but deliberate, a gentle celebration of care and continuity. You lean back, closing your eyes briefly, letting the warmth of the sun and the hum of activity settle around you. The sound of the river, the faint scent of reeds, the soft scraping of ink and fiber all combine into a single, timeless rhythm. Somewhere along the Nile, one of the scrolls you helped roll is already on its way, carrying the labor of your hands, the care of Mena, and the patience of countless artisans. Its journey has begun. And in that quiet, fleeting moment, you understand. The life of Papyrus is not just in the workshop, not just in the ink. Its life begins anew with every journey, every hand that touches it, every river that bears it toward tomorrow. The morning air greets you with the faint, crisp scent of dew-soaked reeds along the Nile. The river glints softly under the first golden rays, and you can hear the distant calls of traders waking to start their day. Mena meets you at the edge of the workshop with a small bundle of scrolls tucked under his arm, his face bright with purpose. "Today," he says, "we see how the world reads our work." You follow him along the stone-paved courtyard, past the drying racks, past workers inspecting seams and edges, until you reach a low wooden dock where a single reed boat waits. Its flat deck is already stacked with scrolls, tied and secured carefully with linen strips. The river laps gently against the hull, and a soft breeze carries the sweet, earthy scent of mud and vegetation. Mena hands you one of the scrolls. "This one," he says, "will travel to a library in Thebes. By the time it arrives, someone there will unroll it for the first time, tracing their fingers over the same fibers you touched yesterday." You hold it carefully, marveling at the smoothness of the polished surface. The seams are perfectly joined, the edges trimmed, the roll tight and neat. Somehow, the scroll seems to hum with potential, as if it knows its words are waiting to be read. A boatman steps forward, pushing the vessel gently into the current. You watch as it drifts away, tiny waves rippling around the hull. Mena points toward the horizon. Papyrus travels slowly but persistently, sometimes for days, sometimes weeks, and yet its journey is only beginning. You feel an odd sense of reverence. The scroll, once a simple reed pressed under stone and sun, now carries messages, knowledge, and prayers beyond the place it was made. You think of all the hands that touched it, your own, Mena's, Papyrus, and the scribes, each leaving a subtle trace of care. Mena gestures to a cluster of merchants preparing a shipment bound for coastal cities. Their boats are larger, reinforced with reeds and mud plaster, stacked high with scrolls, jars, and woven mats. They inspect each roll meticulously, checking the seams and bindings. Historians still argue, Mena says, whether papyrus first became an export commodity or remained purely domestic for centuries. Some claim temples guarded it jealously. Others say merchants saw profit almost immediately. You lean closer, fascinated by the small differences between these bundles. Some scrolls are labeled with red ink, marking royal decrees or temple accounts. Others carry simple titles in black, used for letters or daily records. Each bundle tells its own story, even before the words are read. A young apprentice nearby carefully slides a scroll from the stack into a protective basket. You notice a faint scent of resin lingering on the paper, a minor precaution to prevent insects or mold. It's strange to imagine that the creators thought so far ahead, taking precautions that would affect the scroll's survival for centuries. Mena turns toward you with a faint smile. Some scrolls travel far, across deserts, over mountains, even by sea. Others remain closer, only moving a few miles to local temples or officials. But each one carries the same responsibility: to endure, to convey, to survive. You nod, thinking of the long, slow process of transforming reeds into sheets, sheets into scrolls. Each step was deliberate, patient, reverent. And now the scrolls are vessels of thought, ready to leave the familiarity of the workshop for the unpredictability of the world. The boat drifts downriver, guided by a skilled oarsman. You follow with your eyes as it moves gracefully through the reeds, sunlight glinting off the water. A heron lifts from the bank, wings outstretched, casting a long shadow over the rippling surface. Somehow, the image seems symbolic. Nature observing human craft, a quiet acknowledgement of effort and ingenuity. Mena leans close and points out another detail. See how the scrolls are arranged? Upright for stability, cushioned to prevent bending. Even a small mistake here could ruin the work of weeks. He shakes his head with a wry smile. And yet, the river is unpredictable. A sudden current, a gust of wind, a careless hand, so many factors we cannot control. You feel a mixture of awe and humility. The scrolls are alive in a way, delicate yet resilient, dependent on human care and natural grace. Each journey is a negotiation with the world, a test of everything learned in the workshop. As the boat moves further downriver, you notice villagers along the bank. Some wave, children mimic rowing, and women call out greetings. One man leans over a small cart filled with reeds, inspecting a bundle and murmuring to himself. You imagine he might one day press these reeds into sheets, continuing the cycle you've just witnessed. Mena points out that papyrus was once so valuable that entire temples maintained fleets of boats solely for its transport. They understood, he says, that knowledge and religion were inseparable from these fragile sheets. Without papyrus, much of our civilization would be silent. You watch as another boat approaches, laden with scrolls from upriver. The workers communicate with hand signals, transferring bundles with care. The process is slow but mesmerizing. Each scroll moves in its own small choreography: lift, shift, balance, secure, before being handed off. Nearby, a scribe opens a bundle for inspection. He smooths a sheet with practiced fingers, his pen poised above it. You notice a small quirk in the paper, a faint ripple along the edge. He glances at it briefly and continues writing without hesitation. Perhaps even the most meticulous process cannot remove all traces of imperfection. And yet, the scroll survives.
Imperfections are part of life. Even the strongest reeds bend a little. Even the best scribes make mistakes. The key is that the scroll endures. The day drifts onward, golden and quiet. You sit along the riverbank, watching scrolls drift past, feeling the gentle tug of the current. The distant sound of oars and water splashing creates a calming rhythm, almost hypnotic. You realize the scroll's journey is not just physical. It is a journey of time and human effort, carrying with them the essence of everyone who touched them.
A trader calls out, announcing his destination to other boatmen. Scrolls are being loaded onto a larger vessel bound for the coastal port. Mena explains that some papyrus would eventually reach foreign lands, Greece, Rome, and even beyond. People who have never seen the Nile would one day unroll these same sheets, tracing hieroglyphs made by human hands centuries before. You imagine a scribe in a distant city lifting the fragile scroll from its basket, feeling the smooth polish, examining the seams, marveling at the words. The thought is dizzying, human connections spanning rivers, deserts, oceans, and centuries. As evening approaches, the boats return, unloaded, and the river quiets. The reeds sway gently in the cooling air, the last sunlight reflecting on the water. Mena places a hand on your shoulder. "Tomorrow," he says softly, "we will return to the workshop to see how words are recorded. The scrolls carry our effort, but they are empty without ink." You nod, feeling a mixture of awe and anticipation. The life of papyrus has moved beyond your hands now, becoming a vessel for history itself. You imagine the scrolls resting overnight on the boats, dreaming of the cities they will see, the hands they will pass through, and the words they will hold. The river settles into stillness, and the reeds whisper softly in the evening breeze. Somewhere, a distant flute plays, blending with the gentle lapping of water. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining scrolls drifting downriver, carrying the labor of hands, the patience of artisans, and the quiet reverence of those who understood that something as humble as a reed could carry the weight of eternity. And in that moment, you realize the journey of papyrus is never just about words. It is about connection, endurance, and the quiet miracle of human care. The next morning arrives wrapped in a gentle mist that clings to the Nile, softening the edges of the reeds and boats along the riverbank. You follow Mena through the workshop, the familiar scent of sun-warmed papyrus and polished stone filling your senses. "Today," he says, "you will see the scrolls filled with life, the words that transform sheets of reed into vessels of knowledge, memory, and imagination." Inside the scriptorium, the room hums with quiet energy. Scribes sit cross-legged on mats, reed pens poised above pots of ink. The sunlight filters through lattice windows, casting lattice-shaped patterns across the floor, illuminating stacks of carefully joined papyrus sheets. The air smells faintly of soot, resin, and dust, a combination you've grown to associate with creation itself. Mena hands you a rolled scroll and gestures to a nearby scribe, a lean young man with nimble fingers and ink-stained hands. "Watch closely," Mena murmurs. The way the pen moves across the surface is almost like a dance, delicate, precise, but full of life. You kneel beside him and observe. The scribe dips his pen into the black ink, drawing a line across the pale, polished papyrus. The ink glides smoothly, soaking just enough into the fibers, leaving a perfect mark. He traces hieroglyphs that seem to breathe, each stroke measured, deliberate, almost meditative. Historians still argue, Mena adds softly, whether the Egyptians invented hieratic script purely for speed or also as a form of artistic expression. Perhaps it was both. Perhaps it was magic. The young scribe glances up briefly, then continues, seemingly unaware of your presence. You notice the subtle quirks in his hand, how he adjusts pressure, changes angle, pauses slightly before certain symbols. There's a rhythm, a quiet music in the motion that feels strangely comforting. Mena gestures for you to try. You unroll a clean sheet of papyrus, feeling the smooth fibers under your fingertips. The reed pen is heavier than you expect, the nib sharp but flexible. You dip it into the ink and place it lightly on the page. The first stroke is shaky, your hand betraying your inexperience. But as you continue, guided by Mena's quiet advice, the marks grow steadier, forming recognizable hieroglyphs. You see, he says softly, the papyrus is patient. It waits for your hand, not the other way around. Nearby, Papyrus hums a familiar tune as she writes. You glance over her shoulder and notice a small, curious flourish she adds to the ends of certain symbols. A tiny fish curling into a loop, a bird tilting its head slightly. It's subtle, almost invisible unless you look closely, but it gives the script a life of its own. You can do that, Mena whispers. The scribes often add small personal touches. Nothing too loud, nothing too flashy, just enough to let the papyrus know it is being cared for. The ink feels cool and wet as it touches the fibers. You imagine the journey ahead, how someone, perhaps hundreds of miles away, will unroll this scroll, tracing the shapes of your marks with their fingers. Somewhere in that distant moment, your hand and the papyrus will meet again. Dedi appears at the far end of the room, carrying a finished scroll. He places it on a low bench and begins to carefully unroll it, demonstrating the proper technique. Always handle from the edges, he says. Never press too hard in the middle. The ink is patient, but the fibers are alive. Treat them kindly. You watch as he reads aloud a line from the scroll, a hymn to the river, praising its generosity and constancy. The words are simple, yet their rhythm carries an almost hypnotic cadence. The papyrus seems to hum with them, each line echoing slightly in the chamber, filling the space with a soft resonance that you can almost feel in your chest. Mena leans toward you, pointing at a small section of the scroll. Notice how the scribe leaves tiny spaces between the lines, he says. Not too much, not too little. It helps the eye, it helps the hand, it helps the mind. A scroll is a conversation, not a lecture. You smile at the analogy. Indeed, it feels like the papyrus is speaking, its fibers guiding your pen, shaping your movements. You can almost sense the centuries ahead, waiting patiently for each symbol to endure. A breeze drifts through the open window, rustling the reeds outside. A faint scent of lotus and river mud enters the room, mingling with the smell of ink and papyrus. You breathe deeply, letting the mixture ground you in the moment. Writing on papyrus, you realize, is not just about recording words. It is about participating in a ritual of continuity, of patience, of quiet devotion. You glance at the partially filled scrolls around you. Some are long temple hymns, others simple letters or accounts. Each carries its own personality, its own rhythm, its own intention. You notice a tiny margin note, perhaps a joke or a doodle, tucked discreetly beside the text. Even in serious work, humor survives, hidden but present, like a whisper across time. Mena comes to your side, observing your progress. Do you feel it? He asks. The papyrus, the ink, they are partners in creation. You cannot dominate them. You cannot rush them. You work with them, listen to them, and they reward you. You nod, sensing the truth of it. Every stroke of ink on these fibers is a delicate negotiation, a conversation between human intention and natural material. By midday, you have filled several sheets with symbols that, while imperfect, hold a certain rhythm and character. Mena examines them carefully, nodding with satisfaction. "Not bad," he murmurs. "You're learning to speak their language." Outside, the sun is higher, warming the river and the reeds. Boats drift lazily, carrying scrolls to distant destinations. Somewhere, one of the sheets you touched earlier is already on a journey, its fibers bearing the memory of your hand, ready to meet another centuries-old hand in the future. Mena gathers the scrolls you've worked on and carefully rolls them, tying them with linen strips. "Remember," he says softly, "the papyrus is patient, but the river is not. Handle these carefully, and they will carry your effort far." You watch as the rolled scrolls are lifted and placed into baskets for delivery. The journey continues beyond your hands, beyond the workshop, beyond even the city itself. The words, once etched onto smooth fibers, are now ready to meet the world. And as the afternoon drifts toward evening, you feel a quiet satisfaction. The sheets of papyrus are no longer mere reeds. They are carriers of memory, of human labor, of patience, and of quiet hope. Each stroke of ink, each careful seam, each polished surface is a testament to the delicate partnership between nature and human endeavor. In the fading light, you lean against the doorway, watching scrolls being loaded onto boats for the river. Somewhere downstream, somewhere far beyond, the papyrus will unroll again, revealing the words inscribed upon it by hands long gone. And in that moment, you realize the life of papyrus is not just in the workshop, not just in the scribe's hand. It lives in the journey, in the touch of countless generations, in the slow, deliberate passage of time itself. The morning sun has barely stretched its fingers over the river when you arrive at the workshop, the air cool with the faint scent of wet reeds and the earthy tang of mud along the banks. Today, Mena tells you, is about the journey of papyrus beyond the Nile itself, how these scrolls leave familiar shores and venture into cities, markets, and distant lands. You feel a quiet thrill, a sense of anticipation. The scrolls you helped shape, roll, and polish will soon meet the world. Mena leads you toward the eastern dock, where a larger fleet of reed boats waits. The vessels are sturdily built, reinforced with extra layers of reeds and tar, their decks stacked with bundles of scrolls. Each bundle is labeled meticulously, tied with linen strips, and cushioned with soft reeds to prevent warping. You notice a faint hum in the air, a rhythm of human activity, the low murmur of oars against water, and the occasional laughter of workers. "Look closely," Mena murmurs, "and you'll see that no two scrolls travel the same way. Some ride on the river, some on carts, some are carried by merchants on camelback. Each journey shapes them in its own subtle way." You hold a small bundle, feeling the smooth seams of the joined sheets beneath your fingers. There's a delicate warmth, almost alive, as though the fibers remember the touch of the scribe who inscribed them. You dip your fingers into the feeling of patience, of labor long invested, and it settles into your chest like a quiet drumbeat. A merchant approaches, inspecting the scrolls for shipment. He lifts one, examines the joins, runs a thumb lightly along the edge, and nods. "Careful hands," he mutters. "No cracks, no tears. These must reach Thebes intact." Historians still argue whether long-distance trade of papyrus began as a practical necessity or as a deliberate economic venture. Some claim scribes first needed it for bureaucratic purposes. Others insist merchants recognized its value immediately. You watch as the boats push off, their cargo rocking gently. The sound of water against reeds is hypnotic, and the smell of the river, mud, vegetation, and distant fish mingles with the faint scent of sun-warmed papyrus. Each boat seems to float on a slow current of anticipation, carrying not just sheets of reeds, but the accumulated labor of artisans, scribes, and apprentices. As the boats drift away, Mena explains how papyrus scrolls are packed differently depending on the destination. Coastal cities require sturdier packing to withstand sea travel, while inland caravans emphasize lightness and balance for long treks over sand. You notice tiny variations in wrapping methods, from reed mats to linen cushions, each choice reflecting experience and foresight. A worker beside you slides a scroll into a shallow basket, then adjusts its position carefully, ensuring it rests without pressure on the seams. You watch, fascinated, as even a tiny mistake, a nudge, a tilt, could leave permanent marks. The scrolls are delicate, yet their resilience is remarkable. Each sheet of papyrus carries a secret. It remembers the hand that pressed it, the stone that polished it, the reed that guided it, and now the river that bears it. Mena points toward a boat that drifts slightly off course. Two oarsmen adjust with gentle precision, their movements synchronized, almost like a dance. Even the river tests us, he says. Papyrus endures, but only if handled with care. Every scroll is a compromise between fragility and purpose. You notice a tiny ripple in the water reflecting sunlight onto the scroll's smooth surfaces. Somewhere a bird calls, a heron perhaps, and its wings cast fleeting shadows over the bundles. The river is alive, unpredictable, and yet it nurtures this quiet network of human intention. A caravan of merchants carrying scrolls on camelback arrives at the dock. The animals shuffle patiently, their padded feet adjusting to uneven ground, while the merchants carefully stack their bundles. You watch a young boy gently adjust a scroll's alignment, whispering a soft encouragement, as if the scroll itself could hear him. Mena leans toward you, voice low. Some of these scrolls will never see the Nile again. They will travel deserts, mountains, and cities far beyond our borders. And yet, their journey will preserve words, ideas, and prayers we can only imagine. Even a small misstep could be disastrous, but the ones that survive? He gestures to the departing boats, drifting steadily with the current. Carry eternity. You imagine a scroll reaching a distant city, laid out before a scribe who has never seen the Nile. Their fingers trace the fibers, feeling the joins, the ink, the faint warmth left by centuries-old hands. Somewhere in that moment, the river, the reeds, the sun, and human care converge, whispering across time. Dedi appears quietly, carrying another bundle of scrolls. We often forget, he says softly, that our work lives far beyond the workshop. A single letter or hymn might travel farther than any of us ever will. And sometimes, he adds with a grin, it survives better than the person who wrote it. You laugh softly, imagining centuries ahead when scholars, priests, or curious travelers unroll the scrolls, tracing hieroglyphs with delicate fingers, marveling at their endurance. Some marks may be faded, edges worn, ink slightly blurred, but the essence remains. The life of the papyrus and the work of those who created it survives. Mena gestures toward a smaller boat, its cargo carefully aligned. These scrolls will be taken inland to village temples and administrative centers. Each will be read, copied, and sometimes added to. It is the ripple of human memory, carried on fragile reeds. You watch as a bundle slips slightly from a worker's grip. Quick hands catch it, and the scroll is gently realigned. Even minor errors are mitigated by attention and care. You realize that the journey of papyrus is as much about human diligence as about the material itself. As afternoon drifts in, the sun warms the water, and the boats continue downstream. You sit on the bank, feeling the gentle hum of activity. Oars dipping, bundles shifting, reeds brushing the hulls. Each scroll floats toward a future you cannot fully know, carrying prayers, contracts, letters, and stories, silent yet potent. Mena stands beside you, voice soft. "Tomorrow," he says, "we will return to the workshop. The scrolls are traveling, but our work is not done. Ink, words, and stories still await. The journey of Papyrus is only complete when the words themselves meet the world." You watch the boats fade toward the horizon, their bundles steady, their cargo precious. Somewhere far away, someone will soon unroll these scrolls, connecting with hands, minds, and hearts across space and time. The papyrus you touched, rolled, and polished is no longer just a sheet of reed. It is a bridge between people, places, and generations. And in the quiet that settles over the riverbank, you understand something fundamental. The life of Papyrus is not just in creation or transport, nor only in ink and writing. Its life is in the journey, in care and attention, in the hands that guide it, and in the minds that will one day receive it, whispering across centuries. Dawn seeps gently into the workshop, carrying the cool, earthy scent of the Nile's marshes. You step inside, greeted by the faint warmth of sun-warmed papyrus and the low hum of scribes arranging their tools. Mena stands near a table, a bundle of rolled scrolls at his side, his eyes bright with quiet purpose. "Today," he says, "you will witness the full cycle, how the scrolls meet their words, how ideas are inscribed, and how papyrus truly becomes a living archive." You kneel beside a row of long, polished sheets waiting patiently on low benches. Each is carefully trimmed and joined, ready to receive ink, yet still neutral, silent, almost expectant. Mena hands you a reed pen with a small nib, soaked briefly in black ink. The liquid glistens, catching the early sunlight. You feel its weight, both literal and symbolic. The tool that transforms humble reeds into vessels of memory, devotion, and knowledge. Nearby, a scribe dips his pen into a small clay pot, careful not to smudge the sides. He begins with a slow, deliberate line. The nib glides across the smooth papyrus, leaving a dark, wet trail that immediately seems to breathe. Each hieroglyph forms with precision, the curve of a bird's wing, the subtle tilt of a seated man, the loop of a ripple in the river. You notice the delicate spacing, the intentional pauses, the silent rhythm of the scribe's hand. Historians still argue whether hieroglyphs were primarily functional or symbolic, Mena murmurs softly. Some insist it was meant for ritual and meaning. Others claim speed and record-keeping were the main goals. I think sometimes it's both, practicality draped in poetry. You watch as he gestures toward your first hesitant marks. Go slowly. Listen to the papyrus. Let it guide your hand. It's patient, but it expects respect. Your fingers tremble slightly as the reed tip touches the fibers. The ink flows, dark and fluid, soaking gently, almost magically, into the sheets. The first few symbols are imperfect, uneven, awkward. But as you continue, guided by Mena's quiet presence, a rhythm emerges. The hieroglyphs begin to dance across the page, and you sense a strange harmony between your hand, the reed, and the enduring patience of papyrus. Nearby, Pacaret hums a soft tune, her voice blending with the scratch of nibs and the distant lapping of the river. She traces elegant lines across her sheets, occasionally pausing to add small flourishes. Tiny birds, curling leaves, subtle details that bring the words to life. She notices your progress and smiles. Even small touches matter, she says. A single flourish can give a scroll character, a whisper of personality that survives for centuries. You dip your pen again, steadying your hand. The reed responds as if it knows your intention, the fibers beneath gliding beneath the ink. Slowly, words begin to form, and with them, a quiet magic. The papyrus transforms from inert reed into living memory, a bridge connecting the present to the future. Mena points to a large scroll being completed by Dedi. Notice how he leaves space between the lines, he says. Not too much, not too little. A scroll should breathe. Too cramped and it suffocates. Too loose and the eye wanders. Balance is everything. As you continue, you imagine the scrolls you helped roll yesterday, now safely on the river, perhaps on their way to distant cities. Soon, someone will unroll them, feeling the fibers, tracing the ink with gentle fingers, experiencing your hand's care centuries after it left the workshop. A faint scent of resin drifts through the room, mixed with the subtle aroma of ink and warm papyrus. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling the connection between the material, your hand, and the passage of time. Each stroke, each curve, each careful mark is a tiny miracle of patience and persistence. Mena leans close and whispers, "Every scroll tells a story, not just in words, but in its seams, its polish, its journey. Even the smallest imperfection is a testament to life." You glance around the scriptorium. Scrolls of varying lengths and purposes fill the room. Hymns to the river, letters from officials, inventories, personal notes, even jokes tucked into margins. Each carries intention, care, and now your participation. Somewhere, a small doodle of a cat stealing fish catches your eye, similar to the one Deddy once found hidden in a scroll. You smile softly. Humor, it seems, endures. As the sun climbs higher, the workshop grows warm. A gentle breeze drifts through the windows, causing the faint scent of the river to mingle with the parchment. You finish a section of your scroll, stepping back to admire your work. The hieroglyphs are simple but steady, imperfect but alive. Mena nods approvingly. "It is enough," he says. "You've listened, you've followed, and the papyrus has responded." You roll your completed sheet carefully, tying it with linen strips. The act is almost ceremonial, a moment of reverence. Somewhere, downstream, bundles of scrolls you handled earlier continue their journey, but now they carry words, not just blank fibers. Your work has become part of that living archive. Outside, the river reflects the late afternoon sun, golden and shimmering. Boats drift along its surface, carrying other scrolls, other hands' work, towards cities, temples, and distant lands. You feel a quiet satisfaction, realizing that each scroll, every bundle, is a thread connecting countless lives across space and time. Mena gathers the completed scrolls. "Tomorrow," he says softly, "you will see how these scrolls are stored, protected, and cared for, sometimes for hundreds of years. The work does not end here. Ink may dry, but the story continues." You step outside, feeling the warmth of the sun on your shoulders. The papyrus plants sway gently in the breeze, whispering softly in the river's reflection. Somewhere, far away, someone will one day unroll these scrolls, their fingers tracing the marks of your hand, feeling the care and patience invested in every seam and stroke. And in that quiet, golden light, you understand that the life of papyrus is complete only when it carries words, memory, and intention into the world, enduring the passage of rivers, deserts, and centuries, testaments to patience, diligence, and the quiet, persistent power of human hands. The morning sun spills lazily over the Nile, casting long shadows across the workshop and glinting off polished bundles of papyrus stacked neatly along the stone benches. You step inside, the familiar scent of sun-warmed reeds, ink, and resin greeting you like an old friend. Mena waves you over, eyes calm and bright. "Today," he says softly, "we see the scroll's life come full circle, their storage, preservation, and quiet endurance across generations." You follow him to the inner chambers of the workshop, a room rarely visited by apprentices. The air here is cooler, slightly musty, but it carries a sense of reverence. Scrolls, some small and delicate, Others, long and weighty, are carefully arranged in shallow wooden boxes lined with reeds and soft linen. Each bundle rests as though sleeping, the fibers of the papyrus smooth and polished, seams aligned with meticulous care. Mena gestures for you to handle one of the smaller scrolls. Its surface is warm from yesterday's sunlight, and the joins feel almost alive under your fingertips. You run your thumb along the seam, noting the subtle texture of the fibers. Storage is as important as creation, Mena murmurs. Papyrus can endure rivers and roads, wind and rain, but it demands patience and care when at rest. Neglect it, and it will fade quietly, like a whispered memory. Nearby, Papyrus carefully inspects a bundle bound for Thebes. She taps lightly on the surface, listening for any signs of warping or damage. Even now, she says, we must anticipate time itself. Heat, humidity, insects, dust, all conspire against us. A scroll may survive centuries, but only if we respect its vulnerability. You watch as she places each scroll in a wooden compartment, arranging them by size, use, and destination. The precision is almost hypnotic. Each bundle a tiny universe, carefully catalogued, protected, and prepared for the unknown. Historians still argue, Mena adds softly, whether ancient libraries were more about preserving knowledge or displaying power. Some claim kings stored scrolls to show wealth and wisdom. Others insist temples protected them purely for continuity of knowledge. He glances at you with a faint smile. Perhaps it is always both. You gently unroll a short scroll, the ink still bold and crisp. The hieroglyphs trace softly under your fingertips. It's remarkable. This fragile sheet of reeds has survived pressing, polishing, rolling, transport, and handling, only to rest here quietly, awaiting discovery. The endurance is humbling. Mena motions for you to roll it back carefully, then slide it into its compartment. Even a brief lapse in care can ripple across centuries, he says. The smallest hair, the faintest moisture, can set decay in motion. But treat them gently, and they endure, carrying our hands and thoughts far beyond our own lifetimes. You glance around the chamber. Bundles of papyrus fill the space, some labeled with red ink for sacred texts, others simple black for letters, accounts, or mundane lists. Each carries intention, labor, and anticipation. Some are bound tightly, others loosely cushioned, depending on their purpose and expected journey. All are silent, yet each hums with a quiet, potent energy, the stored memory of human effort and care. A small moth flutters briefly near the window. Papyrus whispers a soft reminder about protective measures, and you imagine that even in such small, fragile rooms, life and decay are constant adversaries. The awareness makes the care you must exercise feel sacred. Mena picks up a large scroll, showing how it is tied with soft linen strips, cushioned by layers of papyrus fibers beneath. Each scroll is a conversation across time, he says, not just between writer and reader, but between hands, minds, and generations. Respect it, and it will speak to centuries yet unborn. You notice subtle variations in the scroll's edges, slight curls, tiny imprints of past handling, the faint gloss of ink that caught the sun differently on each sheet. These imperfections are part of their charm, whispers of a long, patient process. Each scroll is alive in its own way, bearing memory beyond the words themselves. You gently pick up a bundle of small scrolls, imagining the hands that first cut, pressed, polished, and rolled them. You can feel a connection stretching across space and time, as though every fiber carries the echo of labor, patience, and human care. Somewhere downstream, in distant cities, scribes and readers will encounter these same sheets, tracing the marks of generations long past. Mena walks quietly among the stacks, occasionally adjusting a bundle or smoothing an edge. The life of papyrus does not end at creation, nor at transport. It continues in storage, in careful cataloging, in respect for its fragility. Some scrolls will last centuries, others decades. A few may disappear entirely. That is the nature of life, delicate, fleeting, and precious. You take a deep breath, the air smelling faintly of reeds, ink, and time itself. Somewhere beyond these walls, the river carries bundles of your work. Somewhere, future hands will unroll them, reading, learning, connecting across centuries. You feel a quiet awe at the chain of care and attention that allows fragile papyrus to endure. The sun begins to lower, softening the light in the chamber. You slide the final scrolls into their compartments, running a gentle hand across the smooth surfaces one last time. Outside, the Nile glimmers softly, reeds swaying in the breeze. Somewhere along its winding course, other scrolls continue their journey, floating, resting, enduring. Mena leans close and whispers, "Remember, the work of a scribe or artisan never truly ends. Each scroll is a testament to patience, diligence, and care. Treat them well, and they will carry our voices far beyond ourselves." You close your eyes briefly, imagining scrolls drifting slowly down the river, over deserts and mountains, into distant libraries, temples, and homes. Each carries not just words, but the care of countless hands, the patience of artisans, and the enduring quiet of human thought. And as the golden light fades, soft and gentle, you feel the truth of it. The life of papyrus is complete only when it carries words, care, and memory into the world, enduring the passage of time, nature, and human hands. Each scroll is a bridge across centuries, a whisper from the past, a promise to the future. You take a final breath, letting the scents, textures, and quiet energy of the room settle in. The river outside whispers softly. The reeds sway. Somewhere downstream, scrolls drift, unrolling slowly in the minds and hands of the future. And in that quiet, enduring moment, you feel a calmness like no other, the soft satisfaction of having witnessed creation and preservation all in one cycle. Now, as the day gently folds into evening, you let yourself sink into the soft rhythm of the river, the whispering reeds, and the warm, patient presence of the workshop. The scrolls rest, their fibers calm, the ink settled, carrying the quiet legacy of countless hands. You feel the ebb of time, slow and unhurried, like the gentle flow of water over smooth stones. There is no urgency here, only endurance, only care. You imagine the scrolls, rolled and cushioned, lying silently in distant libraries, waiting for future eyes to meet them. They do not rush, yet they travel endlessly. You picture hands centuries ahead, tracing the hieroglyphs, feeling the joins and fibers, connecting to the labor, patience, and creativity that birthed them. It is a comforting thought. The world is full of small, enduring miracles, quietly moving through space and time. Breathe slowly, letting the sun-warmed scent of reeds and ink fade softly around you. Every fiber, every seam, every mark is a story not yet fully told, a quiet bridge to tomorrow. The river hums gently outside. The scrolls whisper in their own silent way. You can almost hear the pulse of history itself, steady and unhurried, reminding you that patience and care can endure longer than you imagine. Let your thoughts drift, following the gentle curve of the Nile, the slow motion of ink drying, the quiet continuity of human hands shaping memory. Feel the calmness settle through your body, through your mind, like the soft brush of papyrus fibers under your fingertips. And as your eyes grow heavy, let the enduring whispers of the past carry you softly into dreams, knowing that life, memory, and patience flow on, gentle and endless, like the river itself. End of script. Sweet dreams.